There are as many molecular machines in the human body as there are functions that the body has to do. So if you think about hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, feeling, blood clotting, respiratory action,
what's the point?
immune response, all of those require a host of machines.
Okay.
When we look at
what
these machines,
do you mean by
we ask
machine?
ourselves, where do they come from? And the standard answer, Darwinian evolution, is very inadequate in my view. And speaking of
because you think a machine is something man-made necessarily.
Yep. But also, he just said it's unsatisfying in my view. That's not an argument. Just because you don't personally think it's satisfying, that's not how you present it.
No.
I find this guy just a complete fucking waste of time because he just keeps saying that, you know, oh, there's these little machines that do things. Yeah. They're not machines. They're fucking organisms carrying out functions. That's like me
molecules.
saying. It's like me saying
chemistry.
They're not organisms.
It is me basically saying my dog is a machine because he is programmed to walk around and piss on the carpet.
Yeah,
kind
of. No, he's just a dog who likes to piss on the carpet. It's not his fault.
Yeah,
George is what you're saying.
I remember the first time I looked in a biochemistry textbook and I saw a drawing of something called a bacterial flagellum with all of its parts in all of its glory. It's had a propeller and the hook region and the drive shaft and the motor and so on. I looked at that and I said, that's an outboard motor. That's designed. You know, that's no chance assemblage.
Okay.
An outboard motor is designed, yes. That is not an outboard motor. It just happens to look somewhat like one. That doesn't mean they are the same thing, you stupid person.
Okay,
and this is very, very simply tested. You know what, Behe? Take a bacteria with a flagellum and knock out certain proteins and see if these have... It's not obviously going to function as a flagellate, but does it still have a function?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. In fact, 40 of the 42 proteins in the bacterial flagellum have been found to have ancestry with other proteins that have different functions in the cell.
Yeah.
In fact, the early ancestral bacterial flagellum was a type 3 secretory system. Now, what a secretory system is, do you know, when you're infected, the bacterial cell some bacteria do this, can pump your cells full with nasty toxins. That's what it's a syringe, basically. It's a little bacterial syringe. And off that note, actually, I just want to add to anyone who actually may be watching either on iTunes or on the live stream right here, maybe they may be able to answer me. Why would I assume you believe this intelligent designer is God or a loving God? Why would he design something like the type 3 secretory system or even the bacterial flagellum, which makes the bacteria, A, easier to get around, and B, much more likely to form a biofilm, which basically is it basically makes it a lot harder to kill with antibiotics when it establishes an infection. For example, Pseudomonas in someone who has cystic fibrosis. You know, this is all great design from a loving, benevolent God.
That's a pretty epic rant there, Kitch. We'll give you
But you see, there's a problem.
I was bound to have one.
These aren't creationists, you see. This is intelligent design.
Nothing
this
at all.
Is science, you know.
Yes. Remember, intelligent design is nothing like creationism.
No,
it's just
absolutely nothing to do with creationists.
It's just a
creationists are idiots.
It's just a complete, like I say, it's a complete random
random
coin.
To say is that when that guy was going on his little rant of, it looks like an outboard motor, and it looks like this, and that looks like your opinion, you fucking dumbass.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you this, Kitch. There is quite a good understanding of how the flagellum evolved, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because this was quite... Because Behe got this epic bitch slap in court over this.
Yeah, I remember the Kitchener versus Dover trial, wasn't that right?
Yeah, he was asked by the attorneys, like, you know, do you know how it evolved? And he said, well, there's no evidence that it evolved. And then the lawyer took out like a huge stack of books, put them in front of Behe. He said, well, all these journals and that are about the evolution of the flagellum. He just said, haven't got round to reading them yet.
I think a lot of that was about the immune system, though. So let's
no, I think
because there were several examples of irreducible complexity he brought up, but anyway, he got his ass handed to him. I just can't remember which one.
Everyone in the chat room, look up Ken Miller on on intelligent design of the flagellum, because he does an example with a mousetrap where he takes away some parts of a mousetrap. Say, well, we can still use it as a tie clip, because we know that's coming next. So we'll carry on.
Yeah, but this also add, look up flagellum, because look up more about the flagellum. If you're actually interested in biochemistry or microbiology, the bacterial flagellum is actually kind of cool. It also aids in the development of biofilms, which can be good or bad. Medically relevant biofilms, they're kind of bad because they allow the bacteria to adhere to a certain point, and in industry they allow bacteria to go adhere and form and corrode pipes, so that's not good.
Irreducible complexity was coined by Mike Behe in describing these molecular machines. Basically what it says is that you have multi-component parts to any given organelle or system in a cell, all of which are necessary for function. That is, if you remove one part, you lose function of that system.
For that specific function.
Yes. Oh, and here we go.
The idea of irreducible complexity can be illustrated by
a based off of ignorance.
Non-biological machine, a mousetrap. The trap is composed of 5 basic pieces: a catch to hold the bait, a strong spring, a thin bent rod called the hammer, a holding bar to secure the hammer
and you can
in place,
remove everything but the wooden block, and it'll work just fine as a doorstop.
If any one of these parts is missing or defective, the mechanism will not work.
As a mousetrap.
All components of this irreducibly complex system must be present simultaneously for the machine to perform its function. Catching mice.
Yeah, but you have arbitrarily decided that that is the function you want, and no other function counts.
All told, there are about 40 different protein parts which are necessary for this machine to work. And if any of those parts are missing,
it'll be something else.
Either you get a flagellum that doesn't work because it's missing the hook, or it's missing the drive shaft or whatever.
Well,
or it doesn't.
Is this just the opposite of the argument?
Evolutionary terms,
you could probably remove 1 or 2 proteins and it won't act as effectively. That's just me. On my basic, just me on my kind of basic understanding of knowledge. I don't really study the flagella in detail, but I'm sure if you remove 1 or 2 proteins, the flagella won't be. You will remove the effectiveness of the flagella, but they'll still function basically as that. Instead, basically be able to work as a flagella, but not as effectively.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, is this basically the argument of if things were different, then they would be different?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Why am I not surprised?
In evolutionary terms, you have to be able to explain how you can build this system gradually when there's no function until you have all those parts.
There is function, it's just a different function, you moron! And this has been explained I don't know how many times.
Machines poses a severe challenge to the power of natural selection.
No.
According to Darwin's theory, even very complex biological structures like an eye, an ear, or a heart can be built gradually over time in small incremental steps.
Quote mine coming up.
Yet, as Darwin made clear, natural selection can only succeed if these random genetic changes provide some advantage to the evolving organism in its struggle for survival.
Yes.
As I have attempted to show, it is not necessary to suppose that the modifications are all simultaneous if they were extremely slight and gradual. Natural selection is scrutinizing the slightest variations, rejecting those that are bad. preserving and adding up all
that's
that
it.
are good.
Right.
Wow.
So
But
we're
could
in
Darwin's
agreement
small,
then.
favorable variations have produced a bacterial flagellum?
Yes.
Some scientists doubt the possibility.
How could
Yeah,
something
they're
new
bad
like a
scientists.
bacterial flagellar motor and all the components that go with it, how could it develop out of a population of bacteria that don't have that system?
Gradually.
Each change, according
Gradually.
to Darwin's theory, has to provide some kind of advantage.
Which it does.
Imagine such a scenario early in the Earth's history.
What are we going for here?
An evolving bacterium somehow develops a tail and perhaps even the pieces necessary to attach it to the cell wall.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That could
Complete
provide an
knowledge.
advantage.
This
I just want
innovation
to
would
stop
provide
here.
no
I
advantage
just
to
know
the cell.
just
Instead,
what's
the tail
happened.
would
What's
lie
happened
immobile.
first was the evolution of the flagella. It first basically evolved as a secretory system, and then this tail. The advantage of this tail, or proteins that were secreted and then attached to the secretory system, it was that it allowed the bacteria to attach to nearby surfaces. And now this is important because it allowed the bacteria to stay in its place. For example, if the bacteria was near a source of nutrients, the bacteria don't want to stay there instead of being flushed downstream. So the bacteria will adhere to rocks or maybe some sort of grass or seaweed or something. Anyway, I don't know. Name anything maybe. Yeah, that's a good advantage. That tail starts to grow. That means if it's longer, it has a better chance of finding something to latch onto and keep and anchoring it in place.
Yeah.
And then the rest, as they say, is science, bitch.
And also, they're trying to imply that it suddenly grew a tail. It said, no, it would have grown, the tail would have grown in increments.
Yeah.
They're looking at
a tail provided function.
Yeah, it's like they're looking at it like...
didn't have to fully evolved flagellum to have some function.
Yeah.
I seem to think that like one day this bacteria was just merely going along and goes, I can do with the tail, and just instantly shits out a giant tail. Yep, this'll do. I'm gonna keep it. Yep.
If only I would love for that scenario to be true. I would have grown a tail by now.
Yeah, I think you would.
Advantage to the cell.
I think we have a tail that's just on the wrong
Instead,
side.
The tail would lie immobile and useless, invisible to natural selection, which by definition can only favor changes that aid survival.
Yes.
Yes.
Which we've established that a
image
tail
is showing
could.
an advantage.
Unless the flagellum mechanism is completely assembled and actually works,
No.
natural selection simply cannot preserve it. It cannot be passed on to the next
Doesn't make
generation.
sense.
The
What are you
important thing
talking
to realize
about?
about natural selection is it selects only for a functional advantage.
Yes.
Actually,
In most cases,
no,
natural
not
selection
really. It
actually
selects
eliminates
against
have
things
no
that are
function or that have
detrimental.
a function that harms the organism. So if you
I
had
mean,
a bacterium with a
it's
tail
the ones
that,
that
didn't function as a
survive
flagellum,
that
chances are
survive.
natural
The ones
selection
that
would
don't
eliminate
are the
it.
ones that are, less fit.
Yeah.
How will having that tail make you less fit for survival?
Oh, goodness knows.
So it could evolve, and at some point, it turns out to give an advantage.
Yeah. And what's even annoying me is even in the freaking image they're showing, it's showing a non-functional flagella having a function. It's showing that bacteria adhering at the early stages of biofilm formation.
Yeah.
I mean, did they even watch these animations before they even put them in the movie? Or it's like,
Of
that
course,
looks
they probably
sciencey.
just fucking stole them all.
And also, aren't most variations neutral? So they don't...
Most genetic variations are neutral.
Yeah.
Because of the way the codon system, basically the codons work, the triplet code, sorry.
Yeah, but like I say...
Sorry, I'm just going to turn on the light because I look like him.
Well, I say...
I'm in my basement.
Also, again, variation is only a slight part of it. Because there is, there's adaptation, there's allelic frequencies and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's That's what the variation does.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm probably wrong, but there are kind of a lot of other mechanisms to evolution, aren't there, Kitch?
Sorry, just kind of.
Well, natural selection isn't the end all be all. It's, I mean, there's sexual selection, for example.
Yeah.
And
artificial
then there's
selection.
What the hell do they call it? Punctuated equilibrium.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I'm not up to date on exactly, but that's basic. I think, and Kitch, you might be able to correct me about this, but that's like when a population becomes isolated, right?
I think.
I think it's something like I'm not myself. I'm not totally up to date with it because that's more. I think that's more zoology than I would be.
Maybe.
Otherwise, based, but and also probably going to be coming up to it with the industrialization and mankind getting so broad and having a much bigger influence on the environment. Artificial selection might start to have a bigger impact.
So I'm going to say punctuated equilibrium, as I understand, it's like an addition to natural selection.
Natural
selection.
I just remember a few little things. If there's no predators for a species, it's not going to be about, which is most well adapted to survive. It's just going to be about which fucks more.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about artificial selection, look at cows. They've been domesticated for not a particularly massive period of time, and yet we already have things like the Belgian Blue, which is just a cow with way too fucking much muscle.
Yeah.
So we selected that and bred to get these things. So you can't. Anyone who says like, "Oh, evolution isn't true," look at cows. We can look back at the
that's microevolution.
No, but think about it this way: we can actually look back.
I hate that term.
I'm just saying. We even have the books of like the first instance of someone finding a Belgian Blue in the wild. And then
but a Belgian Blue is still a cow. It's not a new kind.
Anyway, shall we carry on?
Oh! I will fight you about this, Mortimer. I challenge you to fisticuffs.
Shall we have a duel Shall we have a duel at the end of the show then?
Pistols at dawn.
Not in my current state.
Oh well, for Pumpkin, it's Molotovs at dawn, is it?
Well, it's Molotovs at any time of the day, darling.
All right, let's carry on.
As a flagellum, chances are natural selection would eliminate it. The only way you can select for a flagellum is if you have a flagellum that works, and that means you have to have all the pieces of the motor in place to begin with. Natural selection can't get you the bacterial flagellum. It can only work after the flagellum is there and operating.
Yes, it can, and it has.
We're beating a dead horse.
Michael Behe published a book titled Darwin's Black Box. In it, he argued that natural selection, Darwin's designer substitute, could not explain the origin of the bacterial flagellum or any other irreducibly complex biological...
I'm going to stop it there. Notice that he wrote a book. He didn't write scientific papers. He didn't, go into great detail with experiments or anything like that. He went and he wrote a book. And yes, there is plenty. I think, Kitch, there are plenty of papers about the evolution of flagellum, isn't there?
Yeah. This kind of just angers me. Like, I've read papers before, and I've gone, this is a whole new level of. Like, I actually have respect for those kind of papers that I've just gone like, burn this paper with fire. No, this is. It's just realised he wrote this book about saying how the bacterial flagella could not evolve, and then later it turns out that the books, when he was presented with the books, he said, I haven't got around to read them yet. Then what the fuck are you doing writing a book about something you don't fucking know? Are you fucking...
And also, God. All those papers that you mentioned that were so stupid, they were still submitted. No one said, screw the peer review process, I'm going straight to the public, where ordinary idiots who don't know anything about the subject can read a book written by a scientist who is saying things that would be censored by, the big conspiracy in the scientific community.
Yep. And again, because there's some new people in the Vaughn chat, if you're finding yourself getting muted at random, it's probably because you're using all caps. Because I said the bot is set to auto-mute anyone with all caps. So just to remember that.
Shemale, just so you know, it is actually muting you. It's not just purging your messages anymore. Stop pissing off the bot, or next time I'm just going to fucking leave it.
Don't anger the bot.
And don't anger the pumpkin. Don't piss him out.
And because we got in trouble with the PC crowd, Shemale is the username.
Yes. Before we're not going to go down that alley again. Let's carry on.
I can make it really on PC if you want.
Irreducibly complex
let's not go there.
system. Instead, Behe concluded that the integrated complexity of these systems pointed to intelligent design.
Okay.
Because
Darwin's
why
black box
he didn't
created
do any
immediate
fucking
controversy.
background reading.
Over 75 publications, including some of the world's leading newspapers and scientific journals, reviewed the book. Some scientists praised Behe's work. Others dismissed it as
they were not called biologists
and religiously motivated. Behe's critics also insisted that he had underestimated the power of natural selection.
Yes.
They argued that the flagellum
he doesn't even understand what it is.
From parts used to build simpler molecular machines, like this needle-nose cellular pump. If the components of the pump already existed, they could have been preserved by natural selection. Even
so we're in agreement then.
Fuck off, you stupid prick. I hope you die.
You just shot your own argument in the foot.
At some point was able to borrow components of one molecular machine and build a new machine with some of these components.
Okay, before they come in with the argument that, oh, well, if we leave a scrap heap long enough, a car will be formed. No! Fucking, it doesn't work that way. Things happen that science... Kitsch explain!
Sorry,
we have explained the things they just said. They just countered their own argument.
They've ironically burst their own bubble with that needle.
Yeah.
And is co-option an idea in science?
What?
What they've called this co-option. Is that an actual scientific idea?
Yeah, the bacterial flagella co-opted other systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what evolution does.
Because, like, from common answer,
it's basically the scientific equivalent of MacGyver.
All right.
That's an interesting analogy.
Yeah. Let's carry on.
These components.
Scott Minnick has studied the flagellar motor for nearly 20 years. His research has led him to challenge the co-option argument.
With a bacterial flagellum, you're talking about a machine that's got 40 structural parts. Yes, we find 10 of them are involved in another molecular machine, but the other 30 are
40 of them.
So
I think they all
eventually
are,
you're
right?
going to have to account
as
for...
far as I know, 40 of them have. The other two that just haven't found a function yet, or they probably have and I'm just behind.
So far,
yeah, exactly. That's the next part of the argument. Let's say that you're right. We have only found 10 other components that we know what the function of would be. That doesn't mean that the other 40, 30, whatever, I don't remember what numbers he said, that they don't have one. It means that we don't know that they had one. Yeah. You're making an argument from ignorance.
No, it's not even ignorance. It's more of laziness, or just assuming that we don't. It's assuming that there is no function for those things.
We can't currently unify gravity and quantum mechanics, so let's stop trying because it can't be done. How do I know? Because it hasn't been done yet. Sorry, that doesn't work.
Okay, shall we carry on? Also, also, Kitch, please remember to shout stop when you start ranting. You're forgetting that.
Sorry, I can't. There's so many rules.
Having some other purpose. So you can only follow that argument so far until you run into the problem of you're borrowing parts from nothing. But even if you concede that you have all the parts necessary to build one of these machines, that's only part of the problem. maybe even more complex, I think more complex, is the assembly instructions. That is never addressed by opponents of the irreducible complexity argument.
Chemistry.
Studies of the bacterial motor have indeed revealed
Could
an
they be
even
assembled
deeper
some other
level
way?
of complexity. For its construction not only requires specific parts, but also a precise sequence of assembly.
You've got to make things at the right time. You've got to make the right number of components. You've got to assemble them in a sequential manner. You've got to be able to tell if you've assembled it properly so that you don't waste energy building a structure that's not going to be functional.
Building a molecular machine has been compared to the construction of a house.
It's
where workers
affinity.
follow a detailed blueprint and plan for
Chemistry.
assembly.
Sorry, stop.
And houses
The foundation
don't
of a house is
reproduce.
poured before the walls are erected.
Yeah, but building a house, that analogy doesn't make sense. The components of the house aren't in a media where they're freely allowed to drift about. The components of that towards each other, and there's no. It doesn't make sense. We're taking something that we know can't self-assemble and something we know can self-assemble. It's just I don't know how the best way to say it is, apart from it's a terrible analogy.
Yeah, very.
It's basically the jumbo jet they're going for.
Yeah.
And let's see if they actually say a building requires a builder.
Plumbing
oh
and
God, I
electrical
hope not.
fixtures are installed, poured before the walls are erected.
Oh fuck! It's reset itself again.
Yeah, but
whoever's building that house is doing a really shitty job. Wooden structures are not particularly good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. It's reset. I think I know the problem. For some reason, the XSplit software is running very, very slow tonight.
Okay. Precise sequence.
But yeah, but
them to be attracted to each other.
Protein. In it, he endlessly. So it is with the construction of a flagellar motor.
You build this structure from the inside out. You're counting the number of components in a ring structure or the stator, and once that's assembled, there's feedback that says, okay, no more of that component now. A rod is added, a ring is added, another rod is added, the U-joint is added. Once the U-joint's at a certain size and a certain degree of bend, about a quarter turn, that's shut off, and then you start adding components for the propeller. These are all made in a precise sequence, just like you would build a building.
But that's completely ignoring anything we know about anything, cell signaling. Yeah, anything, but specifically about cell signaling. Yeah, cell signaling. Yeah, it looks pretty damn impressive. But you got to remember, life has been on this planet for 4 billion years, and it hasn't been exactly sitting down twiddling its thumbs. It's been evolving for 4 billion years.
Yeah. Also, Pumpkin, we can hear you typing quite a bit, so...
Yeah.
Alright.
Laptop suck balls.
Coordinate the timing of the assembly instructions. But how could natural selection construct such a system?
The co-option argument doesn't explain this. You see, in order to construct that flagellum
Actually,
mechanism,
it does.
or tens of thousands of other such mechanisms in the cell, you require other machines to regulate the assembly of these structures. And those machines themselves require machines for their assembly.
If even one of these pieces is missing or put in the wrong place, your motor isn't going to work. So this apparatus to assemble the flagellum motor
but that's assuming.
Irreducibly complex.
Stop. Sorry.
In fact,
I forgot to say
what we have here is irreducible complexity all the way.
That's assuming that all the parts are just floating about in nothing, without any affinity or without anything there to direct them. Oh God, I hate fucking. I don't know. I know I'm going to be quoting the head out of. But yeah, no, these parts aren't simply existing in the solution, just with being just hopelessly hoping that they're all going to come together in that kind of way. There's obviously some sort of affinity, some sort of chemistry there to help guide this process.
You can put it like this. I've used this analogy before. If you have, let's say, sodium hydroxide and hydrochloric acid, you pour them together. Now, every single sodium ion is going to find a chlorine ion and react with it. What are the odds of that happening? I mean, of all the possible combinations, why do all of these ions combine with all of these? It's chemistry. It's not chance. That's how it works. There are electromagnetic forces involved. I don't know exactly what forces are involved. Well, obviously electromagnetic, but to be more specific, I don't know beyond that point, that are involved in the biological or biochemical reactions here. But it's just a more complex version of the same thing.
Pretty much.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, what we have here is irreducible complexity all the way down.
We know a lot about the bacterial flagellum. We still have a lot to learn, but we know a lot about it. And there's no explanation for how this complex molecular machine...
Thank you for someone pointing it out. Never a miscommunication. It was on the tip of my tongue. I'm sorry I missed an obvious joke.
All right.
This complex molecular machine was ever produced by a Darwinian mechanism.
Because you haven't bothered to look.
150 years ago, scientists did not know about irreducibly complex molecular machines. Yet Charles Darwin anticipated the difficulty that systems such as these could pose to his theory.
Yep.
If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down.
And guess what? It still hasn't been demonstrated. Notice that he said that it could be demonstrated that any complex system existed, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. He didn't say that a complex system has been found that we can't figure out the explanation for.
Yeah.
Argument from ignorance.
Kitch, did you have something there?
Yeah, and I just want to add that it has to be demonstrated that it's irreducibly complex. It can't be the result of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, all Behe has done is assert it.
Yeah, it's not. It has not been found. There's a difference between it has not been found and it has been demonstrated that it has not been. Those are two very, very different statements, and those kind of statements, although maybe to the layperson may seem kind of the same, or I don't know, but in the scientific literature, that is vital.
Yeah, I think even a layman can understand the difference between making shit up and showing that it's true.
And also, all Darwin was doing in that quote was just being honest, saying, my theory wouldn't work if this and this was discovered.
Yeah, that's something you put in the discussion part of a paper nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, even Darwin had balls to say, you know, I could be wrong, and if things were different, then they'd be different. So, well done, Darwin.
That's how you get...
You help the reader identify things that could be criticized. You know, it's called honesty. You show the weaknesses or potential weaknesses of your theory so that people don't accuse you of trying to hide them.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, that's a hallmark of good papers. They identify... it actually really helps in the peer review process if you can identify the weaknesses in your paper and address them, at least address them in some way, to let the reader, or more importantly, the your reviewer, know that yes, I'm aware of these weaknesses, and here's why and here's steps I've taken, or here's blah blah blah, or at least we couldn't address these weaknesses because of X, Y, and Z, but we know we are aware of them, and here they are.
Yeah, further research is required.
Yeah,
I did the same thing in my my master's thesis. I was analyzing physics textbooks. I'm not going to go into what I was doing, but yes, I pointed out my selection is limited to the ones I was able to find in time at the university library.
Well, it's not even
I
that.
don't feel that I need more in order to make the point here. But a further study should be done where a greater sample is used. That's called honesty.
Yeah, but this is something I even got taught in high school when we were taught how to write like a critical paper or a critical review or something. You say you list all the things that you agree with, and then the things you disagree with, the strengths, the weaknesses. It's just being honest. It's no.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I've taught the final year project students that I had, is just be honest with the weaknesses of your study.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I hope I got through to them.
Also, I'd like to just point this out, this video. We are officially a third. We've already got halfway through it. We are well ahead of... We're getting through this one far quicker than any other ponage we've done, because the old rule of thumb was it takes 3 times as long to pwn the original, because usually like after an hour we've only done 15 minutes. So we're actually doing quite well tonight.
Woohoo!
Have another drink to celebrate.
That calls for a Carlsberg, or in this case, a Carling.
Or in my case, Jack Daniels.
Well, that works too.
Nice.
There are really 2 big questions in biology. How do you get new living forms with new structures like wings and eyes from life that already exists? And secondly, how did life originate on Earth in the first place?
By this little thing called random selection, random changes in natural selection. Haven't we been over this?
Right, stop. Did he just say that the 2 big questions in biology are
Charles Darwin?
How do existing species get wings, and how does new life form? Well, those are 2 completely different fields. That's why they're 2 different questions. So, how do things that already exist get eyes?
One of them isn't really biology; it's biochemistry.
Yeah, and for the other one, that's abiogenesis, not evolution. So if he starts bringing that up, I am going to take so much alcohol I will pass out drunk and then wake up in a furious rage trying to stab him in the kidneys with his pants on.
But they said there about how do wings appear. I think it was Dawkins did a very good demonstration of this, where he kind of, I think it was just 2 objects, and he put like kind of little, not even proper wings, just little kind of, I don't know, like, well, you just put things out on the side and just dropped them and showed how one dropped a bit more gently. So that's, and you know, add that muscle, and then it's just...
That's one possibility, definitely, but I find it more... okay, granted, I'm not a biologist by any stretch, but they could have evolved to help with balance. They could have evolved to maybe just make an animal jump further. There's another one that goes. They were used for roosting eggs.
Well, we only need to look at
that was basically originally just to make it warm for the eggs.
Yeah, but we only need to look at flightless birds today to get a good idea.
Yeah.
Because you got things like penguins, and they use their wings mostly for swimming. So it's like all kinds of things they can be used for.
Charles Darwin compared the history of life on Earth to a great branching tree.
Oh, they're going here, Alan.
Actually, Linnaeus did that first. He was a creationist.
The very first living cell. And the branches were new and more complex life forms that had evolved over time from the first primitive organism.
Darwin was trying to explain how the branches on the tree of life originated. He was trying to show how natural selection could have modified existing organisms to produce the great diversity of plant and animal life that fills the earth today.
Yeah, we've done that.
But when it came to the base of the tree, which represented the origin of the first life, the first living cell.
That's
Darwin
not
had very
evolution, so
little
can
to
we
say.
skip it?
In fact, in The Origin of Species, he didn't even address the question of how life might have originated from non.
Right.
Because that wasn't the point of the fucking book.
You said the title of the book there. Species, not life.
Seriously,
I mean,
if I am going to ask the question, why do things fall? I am looking at the question, why do things fall? I am not forced to answer the question, where did all things come from, in order to answer the question, why do things fall?
Yes.
They are separate questions, moron.
This guy really needs to be kicked in the balls. I'm not saying like I would, I'm just saying that if it was to happen, I wouldn't lament it too much.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I don't know, going to watch a Star Wars movie and complaining it doesn't talk about, I don't know, to pick a topic any random.
It's like watching a Star Wars movie today and complaining that George Lucas changed it.
Right, I would actually probably say it's like going into watch a Star Wars movie and complaining there wasn't enough Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah, or we're going to watch a Star Wars movie and saying, hey, there's nothing about Nazis in this.
Yeah.
So it's not a war movie.
Or it's like going into watching the prequels and thinking, Jar Jar Binks is an interesting character. I wonder how he was born.
Okay. I think
It's questions that cannot and should never be answered.
Yes. I think we're beating the Star Wars analogy to death here. And we're not doing very good at it.
It's not even a good analogy anymore.
Yeah.
It's just ripping on Star Wars.
But who cares? You can never insult the Star Wars prequels and the special editions too much.
Yes.
Yeah, these analogies are making me remember that the prequels exist.
Yes. And, well, this I'm kind of even thinking in my head, would this documentary improve if Jar Jar started speaking right now? Debate that one, chat rooms.
These people so stupid.
Yeah. There you go, chat room. Debate that for you. Would this documentary improve if Jar Jar was in it?
From non-living matter.
The only glimpses we have of Darwin's opinions on the subject appear in a letter he wrote to
hang
a
on,
colleague named
stop.
Joseph Hooker.
Non-living matter.
Yes.
What do you mean by that exactly? Because, I mean, what constitutes living matter? I mean, does a cell consist of living matter?
Yeah.
Life is an emergent property.
But they're going after abiogenesis here quite
Oh yeah, obviously, but I think they have this notion of life being basically vitalism, like life is this magic thing that just puts itself into matter and makes it alive.
Yeah.
Because living matter, it's just chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Regarding the first production of a living organism, if, and oh what a big if, we could conceive in some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts, light, heat and electricity present, that a protein compound was chemically formed, ready to undergo still more complex changes, at the present such matter would be instantly devoured. But this may not have been the case before living creatures were formed.
During the final years of his life, Darwin did little to develop his idea that a primitive cell might have emerged from simple chemicals in the primordial waters of the early
Because
earth.
simple cells,
Yes.
first of all, he didn't even look at that issue, and second, primitive cells didn't emerge from simple chemicals or whatever the hell he said.
And as
There
everyone
are
says,
several steps in between chemicals and a cell, and even a primitive cell.
This is him just giving his personal opinion on something.
Yeah.
And also, it's not his field of study, so why would he spend the rest of his life studying it?
Also, if he starts going on, and I'm pretty sure it's going to come up that Darwin converted on his deathbed, I'm going to fucking tear that a new asshole.
And my response would be, who cares?
Primordial waters of the early Earth. But later in the 1920s and 30s, a Russian scientist named Alexander Oparin formulated a detailed theory about how this could have happened. It was called chemical evolution.
Okay.
Oparin thought that he could explain the origin of the first life using Darwinian principles. He envisioned simple chemicals combining and recombining to form larger molecules, and then these larger molecules organizing themselves with the help of chance variations and natural selection into the first primitive living cell.
Chemistry, moron!
Yeah.
I think we have to do it. Chemistry, you fucking retard! Ever heard of fucking chemistry? Chemistry!
And again, this guy was just putting forward a hypothesis, really.
Yeah.
Into the first primitive living cell.
Over the next 3 decades, many scientists worked to develop and refine these ideas as they pondered the questions both Oparin and Darwin had raised. How could life have evolved from simple chemicals? One man thought he knew.
The problem of biological origins has, for a very long time, I would say, has been a real deep interest to me just because of the scale of the problem, the importance of it. Where did we come from? Why are we here? All that kind of question. Probed from the point of view of natural science.
Yeah, it's
During the late 1960s and throughout the 70s and early 80s, Dean Kenyon was one of the leading chemical evolutionary theorists in the world. And like others in his field, he was trying to explain how life on Earth began through a purely natural process.
Yep, that's what science does.
Well, what else would it come from?
An important book on the origin of life.
Hang on, stop.
Gary Steinman and myself thought that if
Hey.
we were to pull together...
Idiots. You do realize that intelligent design, at least if you want to keep this pretense of it's not creationism, is a naturalistic process. It involves natural life forms creating new life through artificial means. Or wait, are you suggesting, who could have seen this coming, that the designer is supernatural?
Martimer. Aliens. Aliens.
That would be naturalistic.
Aliens.
We shall carry on.
Yeah.
Also,
Gary Steinman
Space
and
Jew
myself thought
reference
that,
coming up.
if we were to pull together in all of the lines of empirical evidence that had accumulated by the mid to late 60s in one continuous argument, we were very enthusiastic about the possibilities for explaining the origin of the main life-building elements.
Despite his optimism, Kenyon faced a significant problem. To explain how life began, he first had to account for the origin of the essential building blocks of every cell that has existed on Earth. Large, complex molecules called proteins.
Proteins have a wide range of function in the cell, everything from structural requirements in terms of scaffolding of the cell, the cytoskeleton, to enzymes, where they're actually processing molecules to harvest energy or to build components of the cell.
Proteins do pretty much all of the jobs inside of the cell, except for storing genetic information. That's left to the DNA, the RNA. But all the day-to-day jobs, cleaning up the cell, making energy, it's all proteins.
Making energy.
Kenyon knew that proteins would have been as important to the first life as they are to living cells today. He also recognized the complexity of their construction.
Do you even physics?
By the 1960s, scientists have determined that even simple cells are made of thousands of different types of proteins. And the function of these molecules derives from their highly complex three-dimensional shapes.
Can we stop right there? It's really
the irregular
briefly,
shapes of some proteins.
It may be a bit of a nitpick, but he just said, today, even the most simplest of cells contain blah blah. I forgot the amount of proteins he stated. Yeah, that's the most simplest cell today after 4 billion years of evolution.
Also, have you noticed now they've gone on to this, they've stopped quoting that scientist they had on a few minutes ago? That's very telling. Now they're talking about how the protein, they've stopped quoting that guy who did all the invest, and now they just say, oh well, how did the proteins form? We don't know. They've actually stopped with the interview with that guy. Very telling that.
Yeah, kind of telling.
The irregular shapes of some proteins allow them to catalyze or trigger chemical reactions because of the hand and glove fit that they have with other molecules in the cell.
Oh, I know it's coming, Pitch.
While other protein molecules form interlocking structural components.
The individual parts of a bacterial motor,
that's just
like this
chemistry,
are each made of either a single protein molecule or an assembly of proteins fitted together.
Yep. Oh, sorry. This model of this hand and glove fit, I forgot actually what the name of the original model is not actually quite right. In fact, the much better model is the induced fit, whereas the substrate, the enzyme's active site, kind of. God, I don't know how to explain this exactly right, so I can catch everybody up to speed.
I think I know. Hold up one hand straight up and down and one horizontal. Then move open your hands.
Sorry. I actually thought I didn't actually thought you were directing. Sorry.
Do it. One
like
hand
this?
vertical. Yeah. Now move one hand into the other and close it around it.
So one hand.
Yeah. There.
Yeah.
That's not a perfect fit. It just happens because of how well, they fit kind of well together, but then they sort of one closes around.
Because I don't think it has to be perfect fits. It just has to be adequate fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I just want to bring this up to keep going on. It's survival of the fittest, where someone said, well, actually a better term would be survival of the barely adequate. Is a better way to term it.
Yeah.
Well, if everyone else is inadequate, sure.
Protein molecule or an assembly of proteins fitted together into a specific shape. These proteins are, in turn, made of smaller chemical units called amino acids that are linked together in long chains.
Well, they'd be made of larger units.
Degree of intricacy of architecture down in the cell units in these protein-forming amino acids.
In nature, 20 different types of amino acids are used to construct protein chains. Biologists have compared them to the 26 letters of the English alphabet.
Alphabetic letters can be arranged in a huge number of possible combinations. And it's the sequential arrangement of the letters that determines whether you have meaningful words and sentences.
Yes,
if the letters
thank you
are
for pointing out that it's an analogy.
You'll get meaningful text. But if they're not arranged correctly, you'll get gibberish. And the same principle applies for amino acids and proteins.
No, that's just...
There are at least 30,000 distinct types of proteins, each made of a different combination.
Like I said, their analogy there was like if you type in something gibberish, but that's just... The whole letters thing, that's something scientists are putting onto to make it easier to understand what's going on.
Yeah, and also there's a huge difference between written language and chemical substances that are analogous to written language, and that is that we can arbitrarily decide the meaning of written text.
Yeah.
We could decide to change what a word means.
And also,
you can't do that with DNA or whatever. It doesn't work that way. And also, the function is derived from the chemistry of it. Go on.
But it's also assuming that it's also assuming that. Sorry, what's the best way to say this? It's kind of it has the end. It's sort of, it has the end point in mind, if you know what I mean. It's saying that if we're taking a basic protein as it is and we rearrange it, and then that means the protein doesn't have its function anymore. But yeah, it doesn't have that function. It may have some other. Well, A, it's assuming that you could just scramble it all together, and that's how it happened. And B, it's assuming that there is no function. The protein may have a function, but my biggest objection is the fact that it's assuming that amino acids came randomly together to form that protein as the function as it is. No, that's not how it happened. It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
There's 30,000 distinct types of proteins, each made of a different combination of the same 20 amino acids. They are arranged, like letters, to form chains, often hundreds of units long. If the amino acids are sequenced correctly, then the chain will fold into a functioning protein.
Proteins are arranged with their amino acids in such a way that the amino acids collapse on each other into an architecture that is pre-programmed by the order of the amino acids. It folds into a certain structure, and that structure can do a certain function. So all proteins in the cell have a certain three-dimensional pattern that's based on the arrangement of amino acids.
It's obviously not two-dimensional.
This arrangement is critical. For if the amino acids are incorrectly sequenced, a useless chain forms, and instead of folding into a protein, it will be destroyed in the cell.
Right, which is why the ones that are there
languages or
work.
Computer codes have a high degree of specificity. The function of the whole depends upon the precise arrangement of the individual parts.
But what
can I stop here? Just, it's a little bit of a nitpick, but I just want to point out that you can change individual amino acids in a protein, and if provided if it's not a functional protein, provided that it's not a functional amino acid, it really it won't affect the amino acid, the function of the protein. And that's how we actually, that actually leads to the technique called amino acid, I forgot the name of the thing, but you can basically go through the protein and replace each amino acid with, I'm trying to think of it now, methionine. I think it's methionine. And by examining that amino acid substitution effect on the protein function, you can determine what amino acids are important for the protein's function. And then from the chemistry, you can come up with how the protein or enzyme operates. Yeah, it's not like every amino acid, which that's kind of implying there, or at least that's the gist I'm getting from it. It's absolutely vital. In fact, if you, in fact, for an enzyme to work, you just need to bring key functional groups together in this close enough, say, space and proximity in order for it to work. That's what the basic protein, the point of the rest of the protein is just to bring these together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't want to overcomplicate things, and I'll probably just confuse myself.
Right. Carry on.
Yeah.
Amino acids that gives rise to the specific shapes and functions of proteins. During the 1950s and 60s, discoveries about protein structure forced biologists to confront this mystery. Dean Kenyon believed he could solve it. In his book, Biochemical Predestination, Kenyon and his co-author, Gary Steinman, proposed an intriguing theory.
God did it.
Kenyon wrote, life might have been biochemically predestined by the properties of attraction that exist between its chemical parts, particularly between amino acids in proteins.
Wow, that's pretty much accurate.
That Biochemical Predestination came out, I and my co-author were totally convinced that we had the scientific explanation for origins.
Kenyon proposed that the chemical properties of the amino acids caused them to be attracted to each other, forming the long chains that became the first proteins.
That probably wouldn't be the whole explanation, but it's part of it.
Yeah.
And this meant that life was effectively inevitable, predestined by nothing more than chemistry.
Many scientists embraced Kenyon's ideas. And over the next 20 years, Biochemical Predestination became a best-selling text on the theory of chemical evolution.
Okay.
Yet 5 years after the book's publication, Kenyon quietly began to doubt the plausibility of his own theory.
That's kind of his problem, isn't it?
During that whole period of time that my doubt.
Besides, it doesn't seem like we're talking about a scientific paper here anyway, so who cares?
When coming into contact with a powerful counter-argument given to me by one of my students, and I could not refute that counter-argument.
Kenyon was challenged to explain how the first proteins could have been assembled without the help of genetic instructions. In living cells today, chains of amino acids are not formed directly by forces of attraction between their parts, the scenario Kenyon envisioned on the early Earth. Instead, another large molecule within the cell stores instructions for sequencing the amino acids in proteins. It is called DNA.
Initially, Kenyon believed that proteins could have formed directly from amino acids without any DNA assembly instructions. And that's why so many scientists were excited about his theory. But the more he and others learned about the properties of amino acids and proteins, the more he began to doubt that proteins could self-assemble without DNA.
In DNA, Kenyon encountered a molecule with a property he could not explain through natural processes.
He couldn't explain. Okay, so it's an argument from ignorance then.
Is a wealth of information in the form of precisely sequenced chemicals that scientists represent with the letters A, C, T, and G. In a written language, information is communicated by a precise arrangement of letters. In the same way, the instructions necessary to assemble amino acids into proteins are conveyed by the sequences of chemicals arranged along the spine of the DNA. This chemical code has been called the language of life. And it is the most
that's an analogy.
Elaborately detailed assembly.
This whole DNA is a language thing. Can you comment on it? And Pumpkin, there's a lot of noise from you at the moment.
Sorry.
If you could...
DNA, I really don't have any way of comparing it to language or linguistics.
Yeah.
But it's just really, as far as I can see, just an analogy to allow us to understand and to teach the basic theory and models about DNA and how DNA functions and how we can do sequence DNA and how we can actually, funny enough, study the evolution of life through DNA sequencing and building of phylogenetic trees. All that bioinformatics.
Yeah. And I also have to say, I always find when they go on about DNA being so complex, it must be designed that the folk that actually discovered DNA are not intelligent design proponents. James Watson is absolutely he's definitely not.
And also, the hallmark of design is simplicity, not complexity.
I would say
if this is all designed by some super powerful being. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm forgetting. These aren't creationists. I'm sorry.
No, they're just intelligent design advocates. Totally different. We don't believe
totally different. But anyway, it would be kind of stupid to design something this complex. Why not make it simpler?
And it is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information in the known universe.
Like other scientists working on the origin of life, Kenyon realized he had two choices. Either he had to explain where these genetic assembly instructions came from, or he had to explain how proteins could have arisen directly from amino acids without DNA in the primordial oceans.
False dichotomy.
Aren't those the same thing?
False dichotomy, false dichotomy.
It's an enormous problem how you could get together in one tiny submicroscopic volume of the primitive ocean all of the hundreds of different molecular components you would need in order for a self-replicating cycle to be established.
It gradually.
So my doubts about whether amino acids could order themselves into meaningful biological sequences on their own without pre-existing genetic material being present. Just reached, I guess for me...
You're assuming it happened on the first attempt. You're also assuming that the laws of chemistry stop working.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much ass-pulling.
Yeah, because they always go like what I think Dawkins termed, they seem to have this, the jackpot theory of evolution, that it just happens just completely at random, all of this. Whereas, like Dawkins said, it's more evolution's more the trial and error theory of life. It's a lot of trial and error, and say a lot more error as well.
Yeah, and they're forgetting also the fact that there's a lot of surface area on this planet for life to evolve in. Not only this planet, but there are 9 planets in this solar system, or 8. Pluto. And that solar system is only one solar system of, I don't know how many solar systems in this galaxy, and this galaxy is one of billions of galaxies.
And that's not even reaching multiverse.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, even if we just entertain, let's just entertain there's no possibility of chance. There's still the universe is a very fucking big place. Yeah. So there's a lot of different varieties of planets, etc., etc. So life is bound to crop up at least once. Yeah. And that's assuming that chance is, somewhat involved there. Or a chance is as big as they're assuming it is involved.
And they're assuming that it's, well, not assuming, but they think it's somehow strange that we find ourselves in the one place where it has led up to us. Well, where else would we find ourselves?
Amino acids could have organized themselves into proteins.
The more I conducted my own studies, including a period of time at NASA Ames Research Center, the more it became apparent that there were multiple difficulties with the chemical evolution account. And further experimental work showed that amino acids do not have the ability to order themselves into any biologically meaningful sequences.
Source, please.
Faced with mounting difficulties in his own theory and a growing body of scientific data about the importance of DNA, Kenyon was forced to confront the absolute necessity of genetic information.
The more I thought about the alternative that was being presented in the criticism,
incorporate information. What's your point?
Problem that all of us who worked on this field had neglected to address, the problem of the origin of genetic information itself. Then I really had to reassess my whole position regarding origins.
For Dean Kenyon, a new question became the focus of his search for life's origin. What was the source of the biological information in DNA?
Divine information!
That is the information, you moron!
Messages, the encoded messages within the living machinery, then you would really
the configuration, the properties, that's the information.
This chemical evolution theory.
Yet Kenyon realized that he faced a narrowing set of options. By the 1970s, most researchers had rejected the idea that the information necessary to build the first cell originated by chance alone.
I'm face palming at the moment, just to let everyone know.
What's really annoying, they're saying by chance alone, when even at the very start they accurately described what Darwin's theory was. They gave a very good description of evolution and Darwin, and it's not completely by chance.
Here's basically what's happened. At the start they came in and said this is how it works. At the end they're like, okay, we're going to ignore all that and just talk shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to go away from the science and logic and peer-reviewed studies. And we're going into fantasy land.
I mean, this
is... I think they just like... It's basically walking in and saying, and here's all the things you could have had, and then throwing it out the window.
Yeah.
Here's all the things you could have had if you had a proper education.
To understand why, consider the difficulty of generating just 2 lines of Shakespeare's play Hamlet by dropping Scrabble letters onto a tabletop.
Not a valid analogy.
Then consider the specific genetic instructions required to build the proteins in even the simplest one-celled organism would fill hundreds of pages.
Okay.
What?
Okay, I want to actually...
keep the parts that form words just by chance, and that happen to fall in the right place just by chance. And then you take all the rest and pour it out again. And now some few more pieces are gonna fit in. And then you take the rest and try it again. That's more now.
And again,
that's a better analogy.
I would like just to say something. If he's never heard the expression, give 100 monkeys 100 typewriters, and eventually they will type out all the works of Shakespeare. Now, we're talking about something that happened in... how could I put this? We're talking about something that happened anywhere on the globe. So there was... Now, I'm not saying it could have happened in the middle of a volcano, but there was large areas it could have happened. So, let's say you have 1 million monkeys. And it had an incredibly
there's still a problem with that, because even in that situation you have no save function.
Yeah, but eventually
you're still talking about chance, and this isn't a chance process.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, even if he was just to say like, oh, it was down to chance, which it isn't, what I'm saying is, given a long enough period of time, a large enough sample base, almost anything can happen within reason.
Right. The sad thing when you make that argument is that you're going to end up with unrealistic figures, because if you actually do, I think I think it was actually a creationist who calculated something about how in order for life to the simplest cell, something like that, to emerge by chance, given so and so many attempts per so and so unit of time, it would take like 10 to the 40,000 years or something like that. And that's actually not unreasonable.
Yep. But like someone pointed out in the chat room there, if you gave a single monkey a typewriter, it wouldn't take long to type the letters ID.
True.
Which is their theory. So yeah, I thought it was funny at the time.
The simplest one-celled organism would fill hundreds of pages of printed text.
Of course, the serious origin of life biologists.
Okay, I'm just going to say they're always on about the simplest one-celled organism today, yes.
Right.
But cells were probably a lot less complex in the past. That's kind of the idea of all this.
Wasn't it just basically a bubble that has a molecule inside it?
Yeah. I mean, Kitch, do you know much about this, like what the early cells were like? They're very, very different to modern cells, weren't they?
Yes, as far as I know, they would have been very basic RNA or nucleic acid in a... Assuming that, that's assuming the definition of life, that it's a self-contained reaction vessel.
Yeah.
You could argue possibly that RNA itself might have been the simplest of life because it's self-replicating.
Yeah.
But maybe RNA in a lipid sac may have been the first common ancestor or ancestors.
Yep.
But basically, Kitch, would you agree that a very simple way to define the simplest kind of life would be a chemical reaction that has the form living thing, whatever it may be, plus nutrients plus energy equals multiple living entities plus waste?
Yes, I would assume so. As within a constrained system, if a contained system, like within a membrane, I would consider that life.
Yeah.
And obviously, in that scenario, the nutrients would be basic RNA nucleotides, and the waste would be just trying to think.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the form of it.
Yeah.
So because I have no idea what exactly constitutes the most simple living thing and what constitutes nutrients.
Well,
so that's beside the point.
Even just to simplify it further, it's just really life is self-replication.
Yeah.
A self-identity. That's what I would consider life.
Right.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, Mortimer's not Swedish, he's Norwegian.
Shut up.
It's not your fault that you're a Viking.
The serious origin of life biologists did not believe that life had arisen by chance alone. Instead, they envisioned natural selection acting on random variations among chemicals to produce the first life. But there was a problem with this proposal.
By definition, natural selection could not have functioned before the existence of the first living cell.
Yay!
No
shit!
Congratulations!
I think I've actually just heard something that made sense. I'm a bit worried.
Now here's the next question. Who
Without
says
DNA,
otherwise?
There is no self-replication. But without self-replication, there is no natural selection.
Yes, you're
So
right.
you can't use natural selection to explain the origin of DNA.
Yep, and no one
without
is.
assuming the existence of the very
And
thing
why
you're
are you trying to?
Chance, natural selection, and his own theory of self-organization had all failed to explain the origin of genetic information. Now Kenyon saw only one alternative.
You haven't even defined information.
We have not the slightest chance of a chemical evolutionary origin for even the simplest of cells. So the concept of the intelligent design of life was immensely attractive to me and made a great deal of sense, as it very closely matched the multiple discoveries in molecular biology.
Again,
in the years
how
since
was that
Kenyon's
the only
rejection of
option
chemical
to you?
evolution, science has revealed the details of an entire system
I believe
of
the
information
answer is
processing
stupid.
that bears the hallmarks of intelligent design.
You haven't demonstrated any intelligent design. You haven't explained how to identify intelligent design. You have just asserted, here's something that evolution can explain, but I don't like the explanation because I'm an idiot. Therefore, God did it. I'm sorry, a designer did it.
After entering the heart of the cell, we see the tightly wound strands of DNA, storehouses for the instructions necessary to build every protein in an organism. In a process known as transcription, a molecular machine first unwinds a section of the DNA helix to expose the genetic instructions needed to assemble a specific protein molecule.
Yep.
Another machine then copies these instructions to form a
Define
molecule known as
machine.
messenger RNA.
What does that machine is so problem?
When transcription is complete, the slender RNA strand carries the genetic information through the nuclear pore complex, the gatekeeper for traffic in and out of the cell nucleus.
Is there a point? None of this indicates one way or the other. You are just saying, here's how it is. You're not drawing conclusions.
The messenger RNA strand
You're not helping anyone draw
conclusions.
conclusions.
Molecular factory called a ribosome. After attaching itself securely, the process of translation begins.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a chemical reaction. or a set thereof, rather.
Inside the ribosome, a molecular assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cell and then linked into chains often hundreds of units long.
What's the point?
This is not in dispute, moron.
Get on with it.
It's actually done by diffusion. But
get on with it.
Whatever.
Make a point.
When the chain is finished, it is moved from the ribosome to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape critical to its function.
Get on with it.
Chaperone proteins.
Something happened. Something.
In the immortal words of Monty
He
Python.
clearly couldn't afford Hans Zimmer to do the score. He could just afford someone who tries to rip him off.
This is absolutely mind-boggling to perceive at this scale of size such a finely tuned apparatus, a device that bears the marks of intelligent design and manufacture.
What?
And we
You haven't established how we identify that.
An immensely complex molecular realm of genetic information processing, and it's exactly this new realm of molecular genetics where we see the most compelling evidence of design on the Earth.
Where? How? You
haven't presented it. You've just said, here's how it is, therefore intelligent design.
Who said that? Oh, click. Oh well.
When I look at molecular machines,
Biologists was
the incredibly
constantly
complex process by which cells divide, I want to ask, is it possible that these things had an intelligence behind them, that there was a plan or a purpose to this structure?
It's
possible.
Ought to be a search
Nobel
for the
laureate, not an ID proponent.
Yeah.
I know it's an appeal to authority, but, you know, don't you think it's kind of interesting that ID proponents don't win Nobel Prizes because, you know, they contribute absolutely jack shit?
Yep.
Methinks that's not a coincidence.
Carry on.
Sure.
See.
Science ought to be a search for the truth about the world.
It is.
Now, we shouldn't prejudge what might be true. We shouldn't say, I don't like that explanation, so I'm going to put it to one side.
Right, so shut up.
Rather, when we come to a puzzle in nature, we ought to bring to that puzzle every possible cause that might explain it.
No.
One of the problems
the probable causes
theory is it artificially rules out a kind of cause even before the evidence has a chance to speak. And the cause that's ruled out is intelligence.
Since the late 19th century, since the time of
It-
Darwin,
stop.
fact, in part because
Intelligence
of Darwin's writing
hasn't
The
been
Origin of
ruled
Species,
out.
scientists
It
came to
hasn't been
accept a
ruled
convention,
in. You
a
have to
definition
give a
of science
reason
that-
for why it should be ruled in. Science is not a process of just brainstorming, throwing shit out there, and everything is accepted until you can find a problem with it.
Or at
Yes,
least just
there
everything.
is a-
Or sorry,
yes.
like all bets are open kind of thing. That's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, sure, there is that aspect to it when you brainstorm and you can throw shit out there on the table, but it doesn't become accepted as a possibility just because someone proposes it.
Yeah.
You have to actually have some reason for why it belongs on the table of possibilities. Intelligent design has not been shown to be a possibility, so stop saying that it's being ruled out and start showing that it should be ruled in. And until you can do that, shut your hole.
Nice rant.
Thank you.
Making me very proud,
Brilliant.
Marty.
Came to accept a convention a definition of science that excluded the possibility of design as a scientific explanation. And that convention has a name. It's called methodological naturalism, and it just means that
yes,
if you're going to be scientific, you
science.
must limit yourself to explanations that invoke only natural causes. You can't invoke
because that's what science is.
And yet, curiously,
so you want
we
science
make inferences to intelligence all the time. It's
Thank
part of our
you,
ordinary
you
reasoning
imbecile.
to recognize
You just said intelligent design isn't science.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Science,
we agree.
by its very definition, cannot investigate the supernatural. Science is the exploration of the natural world.
This short message hid an